Your success is built on stolen money. The glass shattered against the wall behind me, whiskey droplets spraying across my $3,000 suit. I gripped the podium tighter, my knuckles white, as Matt Reynolds, former football star, now balding insurance salesman, stormed toward the stage. The ballroom fell silent, 200 former classmates frozen in shock. I'd spent $50,000 to sponsor tonight's 10-year reunion, ensuring everyone knew Logan Miller had returned to Amarillo as a tech millionaire. Now my triumphant homecoming speech was collapsing in real time. My parents lost their retirement because of your uncle's scheme, Matt snarled, his face inches from mine. The same investment that magically saved your failing startup. I maintained eye contact, keeping my breathing steady while scanning the crowd. My date Jessica was already backing toward the exit. Former friends watched with a mixture of horror and hungry curiosity. The golden, welcome home, class of 2015, banner suddenly seemed like a cruel joke. I don't know what you're talking about, I said quietly, my voice carrying through the silent room. Sarah Collins stepped forward, clutching a manila folder. We have proof, Logan. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but rage. 5 families, our families, lost everything. And 6 months later, $500,000 appears in your company account from your uncle. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I carefully placed the microphone down, adjusting my custom cufflinks as I descended from the stage. That's quite a story, I replied, my voice betraying none of the panic flooding my system. It's not a story, Sarah hissed, slapping the folder onto a nearby table. It's documented fraud. I should have been defensive, should have shouted denials or stormed out. Instead, I pulled out my phone and, without breaking eye contact with Matt, sent a single text message. Then I reached for the folder with a steady hand. That's when the ballroom doors swung open. 3 hours earlier, I'd driven my rental car down the familiar streets of Amarillo, Texas, feeling like a conquering hero returning home. The dusty, flat landscape contrasted sharply with the sleek high-rises of Austin where I'd built my life and my company. 10 years had passed since I'd left this town, promising myself I'd return only when I had something to show for it. And now I did. Logan Tech had just closed its Series B funding round at $40 million. We were featured in TechCrunch last month. I had the penthouse apartment, the sports car, and the success story everyone dreams about when they leave their hometown behind. I pulled into the parking lot of the Amarillo Grand Hotel, the fanciest venue in town, where our 10-year reunion was being held. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, my date for the night. We'd connected on a dating app when I mentioned I was coming to town for the weekend. It wasn't serious, but having a beautiful woman on my arm for tonight felt like the perfect accessory to my success story. I'm waiting in the lobby, her message read. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror, checking my reflection. At 28, I looked different from the gangly, uncertain kid who'd left Amarillo a decade ago. More confident, successful. I was ready to show everyone just how far I'd come. The reunion committee had asked me to give a short speech tonight as the class's biggest success story. I'd prepared something suitably humble yet impressive. I felt a twinge of anticipation at the thought of standing on stage, seeing the expressions of the people who'd overlooked me in high school. I stepped out of the car and straightened my suit jacket. A $3,000 Tom Ford that I'd bought specifically for tonight. Worth every penny. Inside the lobby, Jessica waved at me. She was stunning in a form-fitting black dress, exactly the kind of woman who wouldn't have given me a second glance in high school. You must be excited, she said, kissing my cheek. Big night for you. Just another evening, I replied with practiced nonchalance, offering her my arm. Shall we? We entered the ballroom where decorations in the school colors of purple and gold adorned every surface. A banner welcomed the class of 2015, and professionally printed photos from our yearbook were displayed on easels around the room. I spotted my senior photo and winced. Braces, acne, and a terrible haircut. No one would connect that kid with the man I'd become. Logan Miller, a voice called out. I turned to see Rachel Chun, former student body president and current reunion committee chair, hurrying toward me with a clipboard. We're so excited you could make it. Everyone's been talking about your success. Happy to be here, I said, accepting her enthusiastic hug. We've scheduled your speech right after dinner, she continued. Just 5 minutes on your journey since graduation. People are really looking forward to it. I nodded, scanning the room. Many faces were familiar. aged versions of the teenagers I'd known, while others were completely unrecognizable. Most were gathered in the same cliques they'd belonged to in high school, as if the past decade hadn't happened at all. "Logan Miller," a deep voice said behind me. I turned to find Matt Reynolds, former football star, now sporting a slightly receding hairline and the beginnings of a beer gut. "Man, look at you. Big shot tech entrepreneur now, huh?" "Matt," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Good to see you." His grip was unnecessarily tight. "I've been following your company in the news. Pretty impressive what you've built." "Thank you. What are you up to these days?" His smile tightened. "Insurance. Not as glamorous as tech, but it pays the bills. Most of the time, anyway." I introduced Jessica, who smiled politely but seemed bored by the exchange. Matt's eyes lingered on her a bit too long before he excused himself, promising we'd catch up more later. As dinner approached, I found myself surrounded by former classmates, all suddenly interested in my life and career. People who'd never spoken to me in high school were now acting like we'd been best friends. I played along, enjoying the attention while maintaining a humble facade. "So how'd you get your start?" asked Sarah Collins, who sat across from me at dinner. "Wasn't your degree in marketing, not computer science?" "Good memory," I replied, impressed. Sarah had been one of the few people who'd been kind to me in high school. We'd worked on a few class projects together. I taught myself to code after college. Started small, building websites and apps for local businesses. Then I had an idea for a customer relationship management platform specifically for medical practices. "And the rest is history?" she asked, her tone curious but somewhat strained. "Not exactly. We were on the verge of bankruptcy 3 years ago. Couldn't make payroll. That's when my uncle stepped in with an investment that saved everything. Right place, right time." Sarah and Matt exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher. Before I could ask about it, Rachel was tapping a microphone, calling for everyone's attention as dessert was being served. "Before we continue with our evening, we have a special treat. As many of you know, our own Logan Miller has become quite the success story." As Rachel introduced me, I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was what I'd worked for. The recognition, the respect. I stood and made my way to the small stage, pulling the note cards from my pocket. "Thank you, Rachel," I began, looking out at the sea of faces. 10 years ago, when we left these halls, I don't think any of us knew exactly where we'd end up. I was halfway through my carefully crafted speech about perseverance and opportunity when Matt suddenly stood up, drink in hand. His face was flushed with what I initially thought was too much alcohol. "This is bullshit," he said loudly, interrupting me mid-sentence. The room fell silent. "Excuse me?" I asked, genuinely confused. Matt's eyes were cold with fury. "You're going to stand there and talk about hard work and perseverance when your whole company was built on stolen money." And that's when he threw his drink at me, kicking off the confrontation that had brought us to this moment. Standing in the center of the suddenly silent ballroom, with everyone's eyes on me and Matt's accusations hanging in the air, I made a decision. Instead of defensive anger, I chose calculated composure. "Open it," I said to Sarah, nodding at the folder she'd slammed down. "Show everyone what you found." She seemed surprised by my calm reaction, but recovered quickly. She opened the folder and began pulling out documents, investment prospectuses, bank statements, letters from lawyers. "Your Uncle Roger ran the Panhandle Investment Group," she explained, voice rising as she gained confidence. "He promised safe, guaranteed returns for retirement accounts. My parents put in their entire savings, $230,000. Matt's parents invested $180,000. 3 other families, too." Matt stepped closer, his voice lower but intense. 2 years after we all invested, the money vanished. Your uncle claimed market losses, but there were no real investments. It was a Ponzi scheme. And suddenly, 6 months later, you get a family investment to save your failing company? Do the math, Logan. I carefully kept my expression neutral, though inside, my mind was racing. Uncle Roger had appeared with the cash right when I needed it most, insisting it was from his own savings, that he believed in me. I'd been desperate and grateful, never questioning where the money had come from. "How long have you known about this?" I asked, genuinely curious. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "We connected the dots about 6 months ago. Matt's dad ran into your uncle in Dallas, looking a lot more prosperous than someone who'd supposedly lost everything in bad investments. We started digging. And you waited until tonight to confront me? In front of everyone?" I asked, gesturing around the room. We wanted you to feel what our parents felt, Matt said bitterly. Public humiliation. Loss of everything you'd worked for. Seemed fitting. Mr. Winters finally reached us, placing a calming hand on Matt's shoulder. Maybe we should take this conversation somewhere private, he suggested, ever the mediator. I shook my head. No. If I'm being accused publicly, I'll respond publicly. I turned to the room at large. I had no knowledge of where my uncle's investment came from. If what Matt and Sarah are saying is true, I'm as much a victim of deception as their families. Bullshit. Matt exploded. You expect us to believe you took $500,000 from your uncle without asking any questions? I assumed it was family money. I replied evenly. My uncle has always appeared successful. Well, now you know it wasn't his money, Sarah said. It was stolen from our families. So what are you going to do about it? Before I could answer, the doors to the ballroom swung open. A woman in a crisp pantsuit strode in, carrying a leather portfolio. Eliza Torres, my former high school girlfriend, now a corporate attorney based in Dallas. The person I texted when the accusations started flying. Sorry I'm late, she said, walking directly to our group. Traffic from Dallas was terrible. She surveyed the scene with professional detachment, then turned to me. I see you've already started without me. Matt looked between us, confused. What is this? Eliza smiled tightly. Logan contacted me about an urgent legal matter. I'm his attorney. You knew this was coming, Sarah accused me. You were prepared. I shook my head. No, but I'm not stupid either. When someone ambushes me with accusations that could destroy my company, I call a lawyer. Eliza set her portfolio on the table. Perhaps you could show me these documents you're referring to? As Sarah reluctantly handed over the folder, I addressed the room. I'd like to continue this evening, but clearly, there are serious matters that need to be addressed. If everyone could give us some privacy? Rachel quickly took control, announcing that the dance portion of the evening would begin in the adjoining room. Reluctantly, most of our classmates filed out, though many lingered near the doorway, hoping to overhear what would happen next. Once the crowd had thinned, I sat down at the table with Matt, Sarah, and Eliza. Mr. Winters remained as well, standing slightly apart as a neutral observer. First, I said quietly, I want to be absolutely clear. I had no knowledge of any wrongdoing by my uncle. The investment he made in my company was properly documented as a loan with interest. Convenient, Matt muttered. Second, I continued, ignoring his comment. If what you're saying is true, I'm deeply sorry for what happened to your families. That's genuine. No one should lose their retirement savings to fraud. Your sympathy doesn't pay my parents' bills, Sarah replied coldly. I understand that, I said. Which brings me to my third point. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. How much did your parents lose, exactly? Matt and Sarah exchanged confused glances. My parents lost $180,000, Matt finally said. My dad had to come out of retirement and go back to work at 67. Mine lost $230,000, Sarah added. They had to sell their house and move into an apartment. I nodded, typing something into my phone. And the other families? Sarah hesitated, then named 3 other classmates whose parents had invested with Uncle Roger. The total losses came to just over $850,000. I looked up. If what you're saying is true, then the money that built my company came from your families. In which case, the right thing to do is to return it, with interest. The shock on their faces was almost comical. You're offering to pay it back? Matt asked, suspicious. Not offering. Doing it. I turned my phone around to show a bank transfer in progress. I've just initiated transfers to return the principal amounts you mentioned. The full amount with calculated interest will follow once my financial team verifies everything. Sarah's mouth opened and closed without words. But, I continued, my voice hardening slightly, I want something in return. Of course, Matt said bitterly. There's always a catch. I want the truth, I said. Not just about my uncle's scheme, but about tonight. This ambush was too well orchestrated. The timing too perfect. I leaned forward. Who else knew about this plan to confront me? Who else has been watching my company, waiting for this moment? Sarah and Matt exchanged another look, this one distinctly uncomfortable. It wasn't just us, Sarah admitted after a long pause. We've been in touch with other victims. Building a case. Against my uncle? Against both of you, Matt said. We assumed you were in on it. I laughed without humor. If I had stolen money to invest in my company, would I be dumb enough to come back here and give a speech about my success? Mr. Winters, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Logan always was the smartest in the class. Eliza, who had been examining the documents, looked up. These do appear to show a connection between your uncle's investment group and the timing of his loan to your company. But nothing here directly implicates you in knowledge of the fraud. I nodded, then reached into my inner suit pocket and pulled out a small object. A USB drive. What's that? Sarah asked. Everything I know about my uncle's finances, I replied, placing it on the table. Every communication we've had about the investment. Bank records. Contracts. All the due diligence I could do at the time without raising suspicions. Matt stared at the drive. Why would you have all that ready? I met his gaze steadily. Because I've had my own suspicions for over a year. The timing of his investment was too convenient. The lack of questions too strange. I started gathering information quietly, trying to figure out where the money really came from. Why didn't you come forward if you suspected something? Mr. Winters asked. Because suspicion isn't proof, I replied. And because I was afraid. Afraid that if I was right, everything I'd built would be tainted. That I'd lose everything. I looked at Sarah. Not unlike what your parents experienced. A heavy silence fell over the table. There's something else you should know, I said finally. 3 months ago, I finished repaying my uncle's loan in full, with interest. I cut all financial ties with him. How convenient for you, Matt said, though some of the venom had left his voice. Not convenience. Instinct, I corrected. Something felt wrong. I wanted out. Eliza cleared her throat. If I may, there's a clear path forward here. Logan has already initiated restitution. He's providing evidence that may help build a case against the actual perpetrator. I suggest we formalize this arrangement rather than continuing with public accusations that could damage everyone involved. Sarah studied me carefully. Why would you do this? Pay back money you claim you didn't know was stolen. I met her gaze. Because regardless of what I knew then, I know now. And I can't build my future on someone else's stolen dreams. That's not who I am. Not who I want to be. For the first time since the confrontation began, something in her expression softened. I want to believe you, Logan. Then let me prove it, I said. Not just with money, but with actions. Matt leaned back in his chair, the anger in his face partially replaced by confusion and a reluctant reassessment. You always were full of surprises, Miller. I allowed myself a small smile. That I am. The next morning, I sat in a conference room at the Amarillo Grand Hotel, surrounded by papers, laptops, and coffee cups. Matt and Sarah were there, along with representatives for the other affected families, their forensic accountant, and their lawyer. Eliza sat beside me, professionally guiding the proceedings as we hammered out a formal agreement. Before we finalize anything, I said, I want to be clear that I'm not making this payment under duress or as an admission of guilt. My financial team and legal counsel will need to verify all these claims independently. The family's lawyer nodded. That's reasonable. However, I continued, assuming the verification confirms what I've seen so far, here's what I'm prepared to do. To summarize, Eliza said, subject to verification, Logan will return the principal amounts lost by each family, totaling approximately $846,000. Additionally, he will pay 8% compound interest calculated from the date of initial investment, which adds approximately $312,000. Initial payments will be processed this week, with the remainder following verification. I nodded, watching the faces around the table. The suspicion hadn't completely disappeared, but it had been largely replaced by cautious relief. In exchange, Eliza continued, all parties agree that Logan had no prior knowledge of the source of funds and is making this restitution voluntarily. You also agree not to make public accusations against Logan or his company regarding this matter. What about your uncle? Asked Mr. Peterson, father of another classmate. He's the one who took our money. I've provided everything I have, I said, gesturing to printouts of the files from my USB drive. Bank records, communications, contracts. If you decide to pursue legal action against him, I'll cooperate fully. Why are you really doing this? Matt asked bluntly. You could fight us. Deny everything. Most people in your position would. I considered the question carefully. Partially because it's the right thing to do. Partially because I can afford to. My company is valued at over $100 million now. And partially, I admitted, because I've worked too hard to build my reputation to have it destroyed by something I didn't do. Sarah nodded slowly. That I believe. As we worked through the final details, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Heard what happened. Wow. Call me. I ignored it. Jessica had disappeared last night as soon as the confrontation started, making it clear she wasn't interested in anything beyond the successful image I projected. I couldn't blame her, but I had no intention of pursuing that relationship. Instead, I found myself glancing at Eliza more often than was strictly professional. We'd dated briefly in high school before she'd left for college on the East Coast. Seeing her again, so competent and sharp, was stirring old feelings I hadn't expected. "I think we're done here," Eliza announced finally, sliding the agreement across the table for signatures. "Once this is signed, the transfers will be initiated immediately." One by one, everyone signed. When it came to my turn, I paused, pen hovering over the paper. "I want to say something first," I said, looking around the table. "I came back to Amarillo to show off, to prove I'd made something of myself. I wanted recognition and respect from people who barely noticed me in high school." I shook my head at my own foolishness. Instead, I got a harsh reminder that success isn't just about what you achieve, but how you achieve it. I signed the document with a flourish. Consider that lesson received. As the meeting broke up, people thanked me with varying degrees of sincerity. Matt approached last, his expression still conflicted. "I still don't know if I completely believe you didn't know," he said honestly, "but I respect what you're doing now." "Fair enough," I replied, shaking his hand. "Sometimes all we can do is move forward better than we were before." After everyone else had left, Eliza and I remained in the conference room, gathering papers and closing laptops. "That was impressive," she said. "Not many CEOs would part with over $1 million so readily." "It was never really my money," I replied. "I just didn't know it until yesterday." She studied me with those sharp eyes that had always seen through me. "And what will you tell your investors and board about this sudden financial decision?" I smiled. "The truth. That I discovered the seed money for the company came from questionable sources, so I made it right. They'll respect the integrity of the decision, even if they question the financial wisdom." "And your uncle?" My smile faded. "That's a conversation I'm not looking forward to." "But it needs to happen." We finished packing in comfortable silence. As we headed for the door, I found myself reluctant to end our time together. "Can I buy you lunch before you head back to Dallas?" I asked, "to thank you for dropping everything and coming to my rescue." "Is that what I did?" she asked with a small smile. "Rescue you? Absolutely. You saved me from making this situation much worse." "Then yes, lunch would be nice," she replied. "For old time's sake." As we walked out together, I reflected on how differently this homecoming had turned out from what I'd imagined. I'd come to show off my success, only to discover it was built on a foundation that wasn't mine to claim. I'd come seeking validation from people who hadn't mattered in years, only to find that true validation comes from facing hard truths and making them right. I'd lost money, yes, but I'd gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that when tested, I could choose integrity over image. That the boy who left Amarillo had indeed become a man worth respecting, not for his bank account or company valuation, but for the choices he made when no one was forcing his hand. As Eliza and I stepped out into the Texas sunlight, my phone buzzed again. Uncle Roger's name flashed on the screen. I showed it to Eliza. "Ready for the next confrontation?" she asked. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. "As ready as I'll ever be." "What would you have done? Fought to protect your reputation and company, or made things right at great personal expense? Was I right to pay back money that wasn't technically my debt, or should I have let the legal system handle it?"